Microfono aperto.
Signore e signori, gentili ospiti, the Savings and Investments Union, Achievements and Perspectives, inizierà a breve. Vi preghiamo di prendere posto e vi ricordiamo di attivare la modalità silenzioso sui vostri telefoni cellulari. Grazie. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the Savings and Investments Union, Achievements and Perspectives will begin shortly. We kindly ask you to take your seats and remind you to switch your mobile phones to silent mode. Thank you. Signore e signori, gentili ospiti, the Savings and Investments Union, Achievements and Perspectives inizierà a breve. Vi preghiamo di prendere posto e vi ricordiamo di attivare la modalità silenzioso sui vostri telefoni cellulari. Grazie. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the Savings and Investments Union, Achievements and Perspectives will begin shortly. We kindly ask you to take your seats and remind you to switch your mobile phones to silent mode. Thank you.
settore finanziario e in particolare quello assicurativo sono cruciali per proteggere la stabilità, per sostenere la crescita, per rafforzare la fiducia. La strategia dell'Unione del risparmio e degli investimenti è lo strumento per trasformare i risparmi europei in energia produttiva, per rendere i mercati più accessibili, più integrati, più equi. Offre alle persone nuove opportunità per costruire il proprio futuro. Dà alle imprese i mezzi concreti per crescere, investire, innovare. A meno di un anno dal suo lancio, l'Unione inizia a prendere forma e il settore assicurativo è strategico per il suo successo. Le polizze vita, i regimi pensionistici integrativi, i prodotti assicurativi di protezione sono soluzioni concrete per chi cerca stabilità, per chi vuole costruire il proprio domani. Le assicurazioni liberano liquidità che diventa risorsa per l'economia reale. Permettono di coprire rischi rilevanti con costi contenuti, rafforzano la resilienza delle famiglie, sostengono settori chiave come infrastrutture, transizione energetica e PMI. Guidano i risparmiatori verso scelte consapevoli, sicure, sostenibili. Il contributo del settore assicurativo alla crescita economica e sociale e alla protezione del sistema socio-economico del continente non è più un'opzione, ma una leva fondamentale. Grazie al ruolo del settore assicurativo e previdenziale, che protegge famiglie e imprese dai rischi e promuove così investimenti di lungo termine, l'Unione del risparmio e degli investimenti sarà una realtà capace di dare forza alle imprese, sicurezza alle famiglie e stabilità all'intera comunità.
Giovanni Liverani, Presidente ANIA.
We'd like to introduce Mr. Giovanni Liverani, the President of ANIA. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, dear speakers, it is for me a real pleasure to open today's meeting, organised by ANIA to discuss the initial outcomes and future of the Savings and Investment Union. A special word of thanks and a very warm welcome goes to the European Commissioner for Financial Services, Maria Luisa Albuquerque, whose presence in Rome truly honours us. Her participation bears witness to the urgency and importance of the topic we're about to address, how to mobilise private savings to finance Europe's sustainable growth. I would also like to thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Antonio Tajani, who's going to join us shortly. His authoritative presence is essential in order to place this, let's say, topic in the current complex geopolitical context. I would like to thank the representative of EAS and Under Secretary Freni, who has very graciously accepted to be with us to close the meeting. And finally, I would like to thank Professor Enrico Letta, who honours us with his presence today. Strategy aimed at achieving a true savings and investment union represents one of the most significant innovations of the new European institutional cycle. Letta's single market report, together with Mario Draghi's report on European competitiveness, has provided the backbone for this political agenda. Our sincere appreciation to both for having inspired this step change in Europe's economic and financial integration. Never before has Europe faced such formidable challenges as in recent times, from the COVID crisis to the war in Ukraine, now context of profound geopolitical instability in the Middle East, compounded by escalating global trade tensions. To these, we must also add the less visible but equally dangerous forces that we could term the silent risks, such as increasing frequency and intensity of catastrophic events in our continent, or what I refer to as the silent killer of the West's socio-economic systems, i.e. the demographic risk. We are indeed confronted with a situation without precedent as far as risks are concerned, and that is why Europe's political priorities, amongst which the Savings and Investment Union, must succeed. The goal is very ambitious indeed, i.e. to channel more efficiently citizen savings towards productive investments, preferably within the Union, therefore expanding opportunities for savers and strengthening the competitiveness of businesses. Success will depend on our ability to attract capital flows to support the major development projects Europe urgently needs, ranging from the green and digital transitions to innovation and boosting productivity. And it is against this backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, that as President of ANIA, I strongly reaffirm the strategic and central role of the insurance sector in the debate surrounding the SIU. Who are we as representatives of the insurance sector? We focus on medium to long-term savings. Our primary goal has always been that of protecting families and businesses from life's uncertainties. In doing so, and of course this task is extremely significant from a social point of view, we've also become one of Europe's key financial pillars, managing around 9,500 billion euros in assets. These resources come from citizens, pension funds, life and savings policies, as well as protection products. Indeed, we're also major institutional investors. Our investment portfolios are a pillar of the economy, essential for channeling capital not only into sovereign debt, corporate bonds and equities, but most importantly into long-term investments such as infrastructures, which, as we know, are critical for Europe's competitiveness. And there's another aspect which is often overlooked. We unlock mobilized liquidity. Non-life insurance policies, coming home, health and liability risks, protect the wealth of citizens and businesses with substantial leverage. By insuring against risks, we relieve households and firms from the need to accumulate excessive precautionary savings in current accounts. In doing so, we free up capital that can be employed in productive investment. And I must point out that according to, say, most of the initial European initiatives have not fully acknowledged our value. The actions launched today, such as the communication on financial literacy, the proposals to improve the regulatory framework for securitization, and the recommendation on savings and investment accounts, while important, are neither sufficient nor capable of unlocking the full potential contribution that our sector can provide. The communication on financial literacy is an initiative we strongly support. It is of strategic importance, and we support it throughout the Union. It aims to raise awareness among citizens of the benefits of financial insurance knowledge so that they can better invest their savings. The recent savings and investment accounts recommendation seeks to mobilize household savings, and this is a significant strategic goal. But we were surprised and somewhat disappointed, although the Commissioner has explained a few things that have helped us understand things better. But anyway, we were a bit surprised and a bit disappointed as well that the SIA does not explicitly recognize the role of insurance, neither as a provider nor as a category of eligible investment products. But I understand that there might be the opportunity for this to change. It is no coincidence that throughout Europe, investment-based investment insurance-based investment products are a primary tool for investment thanks to features such as returns, long-term horizon security and guarantees, which make them amongst the most popular solutions for retail savers. They combine protection and long-term investment, addressing the need to invest with confidence and foresight. ANIA's call is clear. We hope that conditions will be created for the full inclusion of insurance instruments in the implementation of the SIA recommendation by member states, including Italy. We must actively promote an approach that establishes a clear link between tax incentives and long-term investment objectives. If our goal is indeed that of transforming savings into productive investment, incentives must be tied to the long-term nature of those investments, and in this respect, the insurance sector has an extraordinary potential to fully unlock the potential of our sector throughout Europe. We have to focus on two crucial issues. Firstly, regulatory simplification and proportionality, and secondly, targeted fiscal incentives. The Solvency II framework remains a cornerstone of financial stability, but 2 years on, it must evolve. We're currently witnessing the finalization of the review of Solvency II rules, and we are waiting with interest the European Commission's delegated act on the implementing technical standards. And I would like to take this opportunity to call on the Commission so that it may consider the expectations of the insurance sector in the final stages of this review. I don't want to go into technicalities, but I would like to illustrate two key, let's say, principles. We must preserve the effectiveness of stabilization tools. We must eliminate unnecessary burdens. We must avoid destabilization of, let's say, Solvency II, and we have to reduce the need for the administrative reporting obligations. This is something that is fundamental at this stage. And then there have to be targeted fiscal incentives to promote the use of targeted insurance cover, because this is the driver behind additional long-term savings that can be employed for infrastructure investment, which Europe is in need of. Finally, it is necessary to introduce effective tools to develop supplementary pensions. Pension dashboards can help raise awareness among workers, but it is essential to ensure the availability of pension products capable of meeting the needs of all citizens, not just that small minority who move across borders as foreseen by the PPP framework. The result has been far from satisfactory. We need simple, effective, widely accessible, and where requested, guaranteed long-term solutions. And I would like to end by saying that the Savings and Investment Union is a crucial initiative for relaunching Europe's competitiveness and economic sovereignty in a particularly complex scenario. In order to achieve this goal, member states must be fully aligned. The market participants must be actively involved, and last but not least, there has to be a strong and united political will. The insurance sector, with its stable long-term savings, is ready to play a key and structural role in the success of the socio-economic systems of our countries. I'd like to add that every year, around this time, we see that there's a need for an additional contribution on the part of insurance companies to, let's say, enhance the say capabilities of our country. We're not going to obviously refuse to do so, but there has to be a reasonable approach. But at the same time, I would like to say that insurance must be recognized as a powerful tool to, let's say, achieve goals of huge collective interest, tackling things like natural disasters, supplementary pensions, lack of self-sufficiency among the senior citizens, lack of financial sustainability, and also the savings and investment union, using insurance potential rather than tapping its resources is going to enable Italy and Europe to be more competitive at a global level. I'm confident that today's debate, enriched by the contributions of so many speakers, will help us reach this goal. I would like to also welcome the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Tajani, and I wish you all a very successful conference. Thank you.
Commissaria per i servizi finanziari e l'Unione del risparmio e degli investimenti, Commissione europea.
Buongiorno. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to ANIA for inviting me to join you today. Good morning, Minister. As Commissioner for Financial Services, I have made a personal commitment to visit every member state within 1 year after the launch of the Savings and Investments Union strategy back in March. It is an ambitious undertaking, but one which I consider essential. Because to make the real impactful change our European financial ecosystem deserves, we need to do more than simply agree on the need to reform. I'm here to genuinely gauge the dynamic in every member state, to understand your specific challenges, concerns, but most importantly, your vision for how we make the needed improvements. The path ahead has to be cleared, and this is something that I would like us to do together. Europe is facing a number of risks, which were mentioned today, and we are all acutely aware of them, and few sectors understand risk better than you. Anticipating how the economy, markets, and society might react to various scenarios and to plan ahead is at the very heart of what you do as insurers. The European Commission is taking a similar approach. We have identified structural risks in our economy that have been building over time. Our task is to address them, to reduce vulnerabilities, strengthen resilience, and enhance Europe's long-term competitiveness. Today, I want to focus on one of the core pillars of our competitiveness agenda, the Savings and Investments Union, and on how we can further empower the insurance sector to remain a driving force in Europe's economic success. The Savings and Investments Union aims to bring about a more efficient and vibrant financing ecosystem across Europe. And clearly, this is something that we are missing. We have a single market that serves 450 million consumers, but we haven't managed yet to fully extend the single market to services and capital. This has long been one of the most complex and politically sensitive parts of the single market agenda, for my predecessors and indeed for me when I served as finance minister. But the world has changed. Across the globe, we are witnessing a turn inward. Nations are consolidating within their borders, and the multilateral model of open trade and cooperation has lost some of its former shine. Global value chains, once symbols of efficiency and interdependence, are now increasingly viewed as vulnerabilities and in many cases as dependencies. Make no mistake, the stakes are high. But today, the political momentum for change is finally on our side. The Savings and Investment Union, as a key lever of our broader strategy to boost Europe's competitiveness, has the potential to create a more diverse and dynamic financing ecosystem, one where companies can grow and thrive at home, and where citizens can participate in and benefit from this growth. From the outset, we have built simplification into the very design of SIU. We have heard industry's message. Europe must become an easier place to do business without compromising financial stability. That is exactly what we are working towards. The insurance sector already plays a vital role in providing long-term financing for our economy and in offering savings products to millions of citizens. This role will remain essential, and we want to make it easier for you to keep fulfilling it. For example, the ongoing Solvency II review, already mentioned today, is a key opportunity to remove undue barriers and enable insurers to scale up their contribution to long-term investments. In the last 5 years, the Commission has been engaged in a project to reform the Solvency II directive. The aim of this reform was to make insurance companies, which together manage roughly 10 trillion euro in assets, a bigger player in the development of the European economy. Solvency II has proven its value as a globally respected and robust regulatory framework, underpinning the resilience of Europe's insurance sector through recent crises. However, we have seen that the prudential calibration of Solvency II may, in effect, discourage a broader allocation of capital towards the real economy. So the Solvency II review seeks to address these concerns in several ways. We will adopt the amendments to the Solvency II delegated regulation next week. This gives all of those who need to apply the new rules a full year of advance notice and preparation. The amendments were developed in close consultation with EIOPA, Member States, European Parliament, and were also subject to a broad public consultation. A wide range of stakeholders, including ANIA, contribute to this process, and their input was taken carefully into account. I want to sincerely thank all stakeholders for their active engagement and valuable contributions throughout the consultation. This review introduces capital relief measures that will unlock tens of billions of euros for the real economy. And I do hope to see those tens of millions of euros invested in our economy. We will follow that up very closely because there is a trade-off to be made here. If there is alleviation on some of the requirements, that has to be reflected in our ability to grow. Otherwise, there is no point. So the responsibility now is on you, and we will be watching that very, very closely. I will not go into the details of this change, but I really want to say that we have tried to find the right balance between allowing for some risk and preserving the anchor of financial stability. It is this recalibration exercise we are trying to make that hopefully will result in more availability of funds to fund the projects that Europe so desperately needs to support our growth. There are obviously other measures we have been pushing forward and other files which are now in the trilogue phase and being discussed with the co-legislators, and they all contribute to the overall objective of completing the single market on financial services, of promoting innovation, of allowing for newcomers also to be an active part of our financial system, providing better services, more efficient services to both our citizens and our companies. There is another element of the proposals we have already put forward, which I want to mention to you today. It is securitization. A part of strengthening capital market financing more broadly is also to revitalize Europe's securitization market. Securitization enables banks and lenders to pool loans and transfer risk, freeing up capital for new lending to households and businesses, including SMEs, and allowing wider risk sharing beyond the banking sector, including with the insurance sector. And this is why it is important. The securitization framework is not designed for banks to be passing the risk among themselves. This is a very useful instrument if we can distribute the risk more efficiently throughout the economy and throughout the financial sector. So once this new framework is in place and its take-up will increase, or so we hope, we are also counting on the insurance sector to help to take part in this better, more efficient distribution of risk across the economy. We know that Europe's securitization market remains small compared with global peers, and this limits its potential to support growth and investment in our economy. So we have adopted in June targeted amendments to the securitization regulation and the capital requirements regulation. These proposals, the first legislative initiative under the SIU, do aim to facilitate sound securitization activity while safeguarding financial stability. Another very important element which goes beyond capital market instruments is the long-term savings pillar that underpins Europe's financial stability and social resistance. We are talking about the supplementary pension sector. And for this, our goal is twofold. We want to help citizens achieve higher retirement incomes by encouraging greater participation in supplementary pensions, and also to improve the capacity of pension funds to channel household savings into the economy, including to productive and innovative investments. The Commission is currently reviewing the existing EU frameworks for IORPS, so the directive for occupational pension schemes, and also for the PEP, the Pan-European Pension Product. We are reviewing this regulation to increase also its take-up. The proposed reviews should be published next month, so we are working very fast on all the things we have to deliver. So I would conclude by making an appeal to you as professionals on the insurance sector, but also as Europeans, as citizens. The Savings and Investments Union is designed to allow every citizen across the EU to have the same opportunities to put their savings to work, to make sure that every company, no matter where in the European Union, has the same opportunities when it comes to access to funding. For this, we need to realize that what is good for Europe is good for the individual member states, and vice versa. This is a project that is good for Italians, and it's good for Europeans. It's good for French, it's good for the Germans, for the Polish, for the whole 27 member states. We have all it takes to succeed. We have the financial resources, we have a very big single market, we have extraordinary talented people, we have democracy, we have stability, we have all it takes. But we really need to act together. We need to act in a way that really allows the single market to develop its full potential, because it is in everyone's interest. And we want also to make sure that investment is for the many, not for the few. And just a brief clarification in this insurance setting on the savings and investments account. This is supposed to be designed in such a way that if you only have 10 euros, you should be able to invest 10 euros. This is not about how to make it easy for the rich people to invest. It's to make it easy for the citizens, everyone, all of us, with fewer savings or more savings, to actually put that money to work, and to create a culture of engagement with capital markets, understanding risk, understanding the relation between risk and return, and that is why we have not recommended that insurance products are included in this account, because the objective of this instrument in particular is to actually promote a culture of taking some risk in appropriate manner, so that people understand the relation between risk-return and to promote long-term engagement. But we are truly counting on the insurance sector as well in other fronts, because diversification is the key. So there is room to keep some money in deposits, to invest in capital markets, to put money in insurance-linked products, and to actually allow our citizens to build better financial futures for themselves. Because ultimately, I think that is the goal that we can all share. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, and looking forward to continue to engage with you.
Antonio Tajani, Vicepresidente del Consiglio, Ministro degli Affari Esteri e della Cooperazione Internazionale.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, allow me to thank President Liverani for having invited me to this important event. I listened very carefully to what Commissioner Albuquerque said. We had a very interesting conversation this morning. We're here to talk about the Savings and Investment Union, and that obviously is a crucial topic for the future of Europe and Italy. I spent most of my political life focusing on Europe. Well, Europe must once again be a driver of competitiveness and growth, but for this to occur, we need a strategy that brings together macroeconomics and microeconomics. There needs to be a commitment to growth and competitiveness in terms of our policies, so that the system as a whole can foster growth for the benefit of all stakeholders. We're faced with global challenges. We have great competitors: India, China, Russia, the United States, Africa, which will have 2.5 billion people by 2050. It is a continent with a population that is often, unfortunately, poor, but it has many resources. So we have to understand what course we should follow. I'm a European sovereignist, not an Italian sovereignist. This doesn't mean I'm not a patriot, but that's a different matter. So Europe today must understand that there has to be a step change. Europe is required to make an additional effort. As the Commissioner said, we need to achieve a banking union, a single capital union, but as we have said many times, otherwise it's not going to be effective. There are huge potential opportunities that we have as yet to tap. This doesn't mean that Italy is going to play a minor role. On the contrary, we need a strategy where finance supports the real economy, in the absence of which this is going to lead to imbalanced policies. If they only focus on developing the market, I think that economic growth must be based on, say, free market policies. We cannot eliminate the market. We can't have excessively, let's say, interventionist state. The rights of citizens must be the main goal. I would like to make reference to the third letter in the acronym of your name. I is in Italian impresa, i.e. enterprises, and that's what you are. And in an entrepreneurial approach, obviously we need to take into account the role you play and the role that you will be able to continue to play even in the face of great difficulties, as Mr. Liverani said, natural disasters, etc. But even in such a complicated international scenario as the present one, we know that we need to focus on the contribution of insurance companies. Look at what happened in the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. 40% of our trade transits through these points of access, and your sector has been called to guarantee our exports. So once again, you play a key role as businesses, as business enterprises, and I believe that you must continue to be able to support our country also with respect to what my mandate involves. As of the 1st of January, there will be an important reform in the Italian Foreign Ministry, which will also deal with foreign trade. It's going to have, let's say, two main focuses, foreign policy and trade. And of course growth is the main purpose of this, and I will strive to ensure that everything we do in foreign policy can adequately support the competitiveness of our products, to increase export, not just export of goods but also of services. Today we export 623.5 billion. The aim is to reach 700 billion by the end of 2027, and my aim is to also involve your sector in this strategy, which brings together both trade policies and foreign policies. And this requires, on the part of our embassies, a commitment to turn into platforms to support entrepreneurs and businesses. And in order to internationalize and export, of course, we need the manufacturing sector, but we also need the insurance companies and banks. Because when we talk about insurance and banking, we're obviously always talking about enterprises. I don't have a punitive vision vis-a-vis insurance companies or banks. I'm neither your friend nor your enemy. I try and be committed to the government to ensure that citizens can be involved in order to boost the effectiveness of our economy. And during the discussions on our budget, I tried to ensure, as I pointed out to your President, that banks and insurance companies should not be considered as enemies of society that have to be, let's say, considered as a source of revenue. If that were not the case, markets would react with fear, and this would drive away investors, both Italian and foreign, and this would damage our economy. Of course, we need to have a very constructive approach. Your world, as the world of banking, needs to ensure that it can make a contribution to our country's economic growth. And I'm sure that you would not shy away. Est modus in rebus, to quote a famous Latin saying. It depends on how I ask you to make a contribution. I have always tried to be very fair in my approach. I have always tried to involve some stakeholders in our economy so that through their contribution the whole system could be more effective, and so that in the medium term there would also be a benefit for the stakeholders involved, banks and investment companies. They're always to be considered as businesses when we talk about enterprises and businesses, as we've done in our budget. We've always tried to support businesses. Obviously, as we know, we're about to, let's say, complete the excessive deficit infringement process, and if the system works, obviously all of the stakeholders would benefit, including insurance companies, and this is what we need to take into account in our exchanges. I've always tried to make sure that there was a very fair approach with clear explanation and not sudden decisions that take us by surprise. As Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, as Deputy Prime Minister, I would like to thank insurance companies for their contribution to the budget. Without your contribution, we would not have been able to reduce the income tax, which, as we know, impacts the middle class in our country. Many of your agents belong to the middle class. They are professionals, and when the personal income tax is reduced, obviously this is going to benefit them. And we've also been able to invest more in the health sector, to hire health workers, doctors, nurses. We have a shortage at the moment, and that's why I wish to thank you, even though it might have been painful, at least as far as I'm concerned. I've always tried to make sure that your contribution could be considered as part of a process that aims to make Italy stronger. And I think we need to continue this strong and constructive partnership, bearing in mind that you are part of our country's productive system. So as far as my mandate is concerned, I will try and involve you more and more when it comes to internationalization and export policies, because I'm confident that in this sector you will be able to make an important contribution. I think that through the Savings and Investment Union, we can strengthen the strategic relevance and competitiveness of the European Union, mobilizing household resources to support common priorities. There are too many examples of, let's say, funds that are locked in Italy and in Europe in general, and when we have develop infrastructures, we start looking for ways to finance them, whereas I think that the private sector in general, and your sector in particular, as was said by your president, is able to play a role in other sectors with investment strategies. Well, he mentioned some, but we have to also consider other possibilities. We have to, for instance, consider the possibility of developing big infrastructures, not just motorway toll booths or our underground parking. We have to be bold, we have to be prepared to invest, and our task, amongst other things, is that of guaranteeing continuity. I believe that our government has achieved this. We have delivered continuity and stability, because none of you, of course, is going to be prepared to invest in the absence of certainty as to the future, because the risk would be excessive. Obviously, every risk comes with every investment comes with risks, but if there's a 5-year horizon, it is possible to take a risk with knowledge of the available support, and this is obviously going to be useful in Europe, where you will be able to use the available funds to enhance growth. You have an important role to play. It's pointless to look at things individually. Banks, insurance companies, small and medium-sized businesses, we've tried to see things keeping in mind the big picture. The government, the Italian government and the European government have to identify the way, and we have to always be on board. Of course, we have to look to the European context. I'm sure Enricoletto is happy to hear me say that, because the European single market system as a whole needs to be on board. It won't be easy. Some will resist this attempt, but this is our great opportunity. If we just sit and wait, well, we might be swept away by this river which is flowing. We must add that 220 of the 625 billion worth of exports are addressed to other European countries, which shows the importance of the single market. People my age will recall how difficult it was to travel in Europe. It wasn't even the European Union at the time. Those my age remember how difficult it was during those days, during the days of the European Community. So there is this opportunity to drive growth, and this must lead to the single capitals market, the banking union, and against this backdrop, insurance companies have a key role to play. They are the natural bridge between savings and investment, and a source of stability for the financial system. You have to reassure everyone that you are able to guarantee you are reassuring, which is what a government should be and which is what you are. And I say this very frequently, so we have to make sure that you can make your contribution to support long-term projects. And this is important for sustainable and productive investment. In the absence of this strategy, we are actually doomed. Think of what Xi Jinping said at the Communist Party Congress. China has a strategy. It has a clear vision. It wants to become the world leader, replacing the United States. That is legitimate, but it has a strategy. And everything is done to pursue this strategy. Only focusing on day-to-day less important things doesn't enable us to see the big picture. You miss the wood for the trees. And that's why I am trying to insist on this. I think Europe should do more to, let's say, enable businesses, including yours, to unlock their full potential. We need to have not just an industrial policy, we have to support also the development of the services sector. So bringing together manufacturing and services is how we can drive growth. And as we know, insurance originally was developed to support trade, thanks to the brilliant Italian minds. Insurance actually was born in Italy. So Italy is poised to make this happen again. So we have to consider the importance of the revolution here at the Foreign Ministry in Italy. I would like to invite you to join us at the third export conference, which will be attended by all the ambassadors in Italy. It is not just a reform that affects the workings of the Italian Foreign Ministry, but it affects the diplomatic system as a whole. And I'd like to hope that you'll be involved in strengthening, let's say, the system, which can back our export vocation. Hopefully President Liverani will accept to speak and see how insurance can be part of a bigger picture, part of a strategic design to support Italy. And at a European level, I had a discussion with the Commissioner about this. We will try and do everything we possibly can, both with respect to the Council, and now I can wear my hat as Vice President of the European People's Party. Hopefully, in the European Parliament, we'll be able to continue supporting an entrepreneurial policy, which is not going to penalise you, but is going to be based on fair rules. It's not about doing you a favour. It's about fairness, because if a rule is fair, everyone will accept it, even if it's partially painful. But there should be no, let's say, gratuitous penalisation involved. Wealth can be distributed fairly, but we must not think that we have enemies that we have to bleed to death, because populism generally does not benefit the people. And therefore I think our approach, the way we're cooperating, is the right way to go about it. Of course, we can always improve, as the President said. Hopefully in Parliament we will be able to introduce, let's say, changes so the process can start with the Italian government, and then in Parliament it will be possible to improve things for the common good. That is my commitment. That is what I am seeking to achieve. And this is something which hopefully you will be able to support, as you've always done, for the good of our country's economic growth. So I wish you a successful meeting, and hopefully the future for our citizens can improve as a consequence.
Enrico Letta, Presidente AREL, Presidente Institut Jacques Delors, autore del rapporto Much More Than a Market.
Grazie molte.
Thank you very much, Mr. Liverani. Thank you very much to ANIA for your kind invitation. I'm very, very happy to be here today in order to make some additional comments after having listened to you, Mr. Liverani, the Commissioner, and now Deputy Prime Minister Tajani. You're all convergent. We are all going in the same direction. And if you will allow me, in just a few minutes, I would like to make one initial point. 1 year after its launch, you may well say it's only 1 year after the launch of this union, so we have time. Well, time is running out. We are 25 years late when it comes to the integration of European financial markets. This is the point I would like to start from, because otherwise the rest of my comments will be skewed. And we are running late for a very simple reason. As Mr. Tajani was rightly saying, we need to go back to the origins of the common market at the prompting of Italy, by the way. I'm very proud to say that I was able to visit all 26 European countries at the beginning of my mandate. I visited also places which were not exactly the capital cities of these countries, and amongst the various places I visited, I went to Stuttgart, and you may well wonder why. Well, this is the place where in the early 80s, the Italian foreign minister met together with the German foreign minister, and together they drafted a common document, the Colombo-Geschner Act, from which the 1985 European Council originated, held in Milan in Italy, following which the common market was created as recognized by Jacques Delors. Why am I saying this? Well, because at those times, if someone had told us or had asked us, is it going to be easier to integrate the financial markets or is it going to be easier to have a single common currency? We would have all said, no, having a common currency is impossible. It's really complicated. There is a strong identity with national currencies. And now, 35 years later, we have a situation where we do have a common currency. We have the euro, which exists. It's a success story, but we do not have the integration of financial markets in Europe. And the competitiveness of our European economy is now being undermined precisely because we have this asymmetry. The euro, the common currency works. It's very successful. It's an unexpected success, if you like. I'm quite familiar with the situation of a country which approved the euro, Frederick, in a referendum held in 1992, 51 to 49. The Maastricht Treaty in France was approved with a tiny majority. Now, instead in France, the euro is considered positively by 80% of respondents, and the same is true for Italy. Nobody questions the value of a common currency today. However, the integration of financial markets is missing. We have 27 separate financial markets. And because we have 27 separate and different financial markets, we are missing on the scale dimension, which means that today we risk becoming a colony of Wall Street. Because let's be blunt about this. Every year which goes by without us having integrated European financial markets, without having scaled up our markets, well, the more time goes by, the more we are going to be backward. We can well wonder whether we're going to end up being a colony of Wall Street or a colony of China. We know that, however, the American dimension is very strong because, after all, the U.S. market is unique. Anywhere you may be in the U.S., you have access to the American market, which is half of the world market, if not more. In Europe, you do not have immediate access to the European market. Everything is mediated by your national dimension. And as we have seen, and as we are still seeing with banks, and as we can see in many other cases and sectors as well, your national domestic dimension becomes a hindrance, becomes a liability. Not because you're being thwarted by the Americans, but by your neighbors. And your neighboring countries are all busy protecting their own national champions. And if we are all so keen on protecting our national champions, our domestic champions, we lose sight of the European perspective. And with the oncoming of China and India and other major economies, everything is changing. So there is this point I'm making today, the point of urgency. And by the way, President Liverani very much appreciated the fact that ANIA wanted to play a preeminent role in Italy in conveying this message. Of course, you are speaking to the insurance sector, but the insurance sector is a very important component, and it does allow us to broaden this type of reasoning. The economy without an integrated financial services market geared to the needs of the real economy, because this is the object of the Savings and Investment Union, putting together these two concepts which traditionally have been on a twin track and have never actually been united. So unless we can turn the financial power to the service of the real economy, well, the financial power is going to be sterile and useless, which can well explain the fact that we are currently exporting capitals to Wall Street. We have this figure, 300 billion euros are the sum of European savings which are channeled towards American companies, the American market. So these U.S. companies are being propped up by European savings, and then they compete against our companies. So this points to the very heavy cost which is actually incurred because of financial fragmentation. Now, there are many developments underway. I tend to be an optimist. I always see the glass half full. But we heard yesterday that an agreement was reached between Leonardo, Thales and Airbus concerning satellites. And this shows that finally we're going in the right direction. So there is the need to scale up. We need to achieve a significant scale which can help us fend off competition. Do you know how many satellites have been orbited by Americans? 139. The Chinese, 65. How many by the Europeans? This year, 4. So the difference is huge. So if you think that we Italians send our satellites, the French send their own satellites, the Germans theirs, of course the US is going to win. This agreement involving Thales, Airbus and Leonardo goes into the right direction. Now, I think that we can have we can do something similar also with the financial services. And it's very important for us Italians to play a leadership role in this. As Mr. Tajani was saying, we Italians have an inclination for experts, for playing and operating in the global market. So we don't want to focus just on the protection of our tiny national interests, and we don't want this to happen also with all other European countries, because otherwise this would amount to suicide. I'm saying this because this level playing field objective is the real objective to be achieved. We don't want to just counter our external aggressors. We also want to do away with the internal barriers. We want to put things right at home. We want to eliminate all the obstacles and barriers which prevent us from being successful. And we know that we must do away with unnecessary shackles. So please remember that this strategy is not only something which applies to us. You mentioned Xi Jinping. Well, let me also mention his speech made in July to the Commission. If you reread it, is essential. The Economic Commission of the party in China, and he addressed this committee or commission. And if you read carefully the speech, it mimics what we say about the European internal market. He mentioned all the internal barriers which exist in China and which are put up by the single provinces and by the single states, and he too identifies these as being limitations. So he decides that this has to be done away with, and what he says goes. So in July, he drafted this plan to have the integration of all of these realities leading to a single market in China. And we must do likewise. The other important piece of news is what we heard last night. Yesterday's European Council, in its conclusions, item 32, committed to something which echoes the commitment made by President von der Leyen during the State of the Union, a speech where what was mostly perceived by public opinion were related to geopolitics. She discussed Russian drones in Poland, the tragedy in Gaza, but she also said something crucial. She said, we commit to completing all lose threads of the common European market by 2028. 2028, when I heard this date, I could only rejoice because this was the point of my report. I pointed to the importance of setting firm deadlines, and this is what the law did. The common market or the single market could be achieved because a date had been set. And von der Leyen says 2028. She indicates a 5-point matrix, which I totally share because it partly overlaps what is contained in my report. 3 vertical points, financial markets, energy, connectivity, and 2 horizontal points. I'm looking at Mr. Freni, the 28th regime, and the 5th freedom. So the theme of innovation, the 2 cross-cutting themes, if you like. Yesterday, the European Council formally, in its conclusions, which are so important, formally committed to 2028 as a deadline. We don't know if it's 1st of January or 31st of December 2028, but 2028 it is. And Pascal Lamy, head of cabinet of the law, when the 1992 date had been set for the single market, shared with me that initially an earlier date had been set, but then this was postponed to 31st of December 1992. Anyway, this leadership choice has been made, not just Italian, but also thanks to the presence of Commissioner Albuquerque. We also have a European presence, so there is a European commitment. And yesterday's conclusions were also approved by the Italian government, and what Minister Tajani said today goes into this direction. So it is full on board. We want to complete the single market by 2028. And for me, this is the most important thing amongst the many things that can be said about the single market. Why am I saying it's the most important point? Because unless we set the conditions whereby the real economy can be financed by the investments which exist in Europe, but which are currently being rechanneled, we cannot finance these common investments. This is a red alert, because it's important for us to be fully aware. I did say that this is something urgent, but there is also something that we cannot forget, especially we Italians. Next generation EU is going to expire next year. Our National Recovery and Resilience Plan will be completed next year, which means that this is the end of the boost which has been given to specific areas of our country. And I can see how Next Generation EU has contributed to the development and growth of Spain, and the same is true for Italy, Greece, and Portugal. Well, these funds are drying up. These funds are about to come to completion. They're not actually being replaced because the logic is this was something which was set aside in the face of COVID. And now instead we have a situation where we need to replace these funds. One important element is what has been decided with the SAFE, in other words, investments in innovation, dual use, which also involves security. And then it is also important for this to be successful, as already hoped for by Mr. Liverani, on the basis of all the various initiatives which can be launched. We want these investments, in other words, to be put to the use of the real economy so that we can boost innovation, we can boost the green transition, we can have better security, better infrastructures, the digital economy, all these projects which are so direly needed. So the savings and investments account can be an important instrument which goes into the right direction, and I think that it is legitimate for insurance companies to decide to play a role. We are going in the right direction. Unfortunately, the instrument they used was a recommendation, which is a weaker instrument. Let me say this very frankly. I think we need to do away with directives. We must just deal with regulations. Something is decided, and once it's decided, it applies to all. And this is especially important for you, entrepreneurs, because in this way you are free to operate. Because if we all put up barriers because directives are being transposed as the various member countries' best wish, this is going to hamper you, entrepreneurs. So it's in our interest. And let me now conclude by making a brief reference to Solvency II. What Commissioner Albuquerque said today certainly points to an important and interesting direction, but let me conclude as I started. Time is running out. There must be urgency. This is something that I would like to leave you with today. There's the date, 2028, at long last has been set. I hope it is a deadline which can mobilize and galvanize us into action so that all member countries, institutions, European institutions can both start acting. We must all go in the same direction. Otherwise, competitiveness risks being a mere abstraction, something rhetorical, something which belongs to our past. Certainly, we, countries like mine, which contributed to the creation of the European Union, have had a glorious past. The Italian economic miracle, for example. But now we must look ahead. We must work for the future. And by the way, when we speak about the need to be present in a new world with a different dimension, I would like to remind you all that when the single European market was created, Italy, with its 60 million inhabitants, the same as today, was economically as important as India and China put together, which you may think is crazy. You may smile when you think about this, but that's the way it is. While instead India and China are 20 times the size of Italy or 20 times the size of France. So we need to have a different presence in this new world. Insurance companies already play a very innovative role in this, and I hope that this role will be increasingly recognized. Just an additional 30 seconds to say that President Liverani mentioned pensions. Well, let me quote something that the German Chancellor came up with, something which we would need to consider very carefully, Antonio. The problem is not represented by pensions for those who go into early retirement, but rather we must think of instruments which may give young people today, young people aged 18, the possibility already to capitalize so that they can integrate their future pensions, because the real scourge here, the real problem is demographics, and this is something crucial that needs to be considered throughout the European Union.
Luigi Federico Signorini, Presidente IVAS e Direttore Generale Banca d'Italia.
Buongiorno, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have to apologize because given the title of the conference and the presence of many European guests, my speech was written in English, but I am sure that the audience will understand and appreciate it. And this year's theme, actually, the Savings and Investment Union, it's a very important subject, and I've given several speeches on this matter recently, so another apology to those who may have heard similar remarks made by me, especially in my capacity as the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Italy, making similar points. But given the theme, and thought I would like to take the opportunity to share also with this audience some thoughts on what I see as the key steps needed for achieving this goal, with a focus on issues concerning insurance. Why is this subject so important? I think the previous speakers have said it very clearly. Every economic textbook will tell you that, generally speaking, integrated markets result in a more efficient allocation of resources. This principle has been, in fact, one key economic motivation for the European process since 1957. However, the pursuit of closer integration of markets, and specifically of the capital and financial markets, has a special relevance for the Europe of today. These are times of accelerating innovation, and the perception is now widespread that Europe risks being left behind. And I think that President Leto was very eloquent on this subject. To realize the full potential of technological development for growth and prosperity, a better environment for innovation and innovative investment in Europe is a key requirement. There are many areas where improvement in policies and regulations need to be considered. A more efficient market for capital, though by no means the only relevant issue, is certainly one of them. The raw material for investment is savings. There is no shortage of savings in Europe. The euro average savings rate has consistently been higher than 13% since 2010, compared with about 7% in the United States. And last year, European household saving exceeded 1.4 trillion, 15.3% of gross disposable income. But as President Letta said, a significant share of European savings finances investments abroad. This is a counterpart of the area's structural current account surplus and on its sizable positive international investment position. A strong international investment position is a good thing to have, but you can have too much of a good thing. A significant and protracted excess of savings over investment may signal the insufficient ability of the area to attract funds from both domestic and foreign savers. As a destination for investment, Europe has two major strengths: excellent human capital and a very large market. The interaction between these two factors can be extremely powerful. To exploit this potential in full, however, effective market integration is a necessary condition. Despite much progress made over the years and actually decades, Europe cannot yet be said to be a fully integrated market. Specifically, for capital, internal barriers remain in various segments of the financial system: banks, market finance, insurance, and let me consider each in turn. First, banks. Banks that are strong and competitive are vital for channeling savings towards productive investments. They do this both directly as providers of credit to businesses and indirectly by supporting capital markets through the supply of liquidity and investment services. The banking union is at a much more advanced stage than that of other financial sectors. Since 2014, the supervision of euro area banks has been carried out jointly by the ECB and national authorities. Harmonized standards and practices, daily work side by side within joint supervisory teams, full information sharing and a common methodology have resulted in a largely unified supervisory structure. As I recently reminisced, those like your speaker who found themselves in supervisors' metaphoric trenches 15 or more years ago, fighting the fire of the global financial crisis, cannot fail to see the difference. At that time, in a situation of acute tension, each national supervisor only had a mandate to look after its own bank. There were no established common practices. Despite the communication channels that were promptly activated, the exchange of information encountered legal and technical limitation. There was a lack of institutional instruments for managing systemic risk with a European perspective. Those days are long gone. However, the journey is not finished. Several elements are missing, even banking. There's still no common deposit insurance scheme. The resolution framework needs reviewing based on experience. And as a matter of fact, many indicators of banking integration have ceased to improve. The remaining effective barriers to cross-border banking should therefore be taken down. I welcome the Commission's intention to set ambitious goals for the banking union. Second, the capital market. Improved policies for the capital market are the cornerstone of the Commission's Savings and Investment Union strategy that we are discussing today. This strategy has four main dimensions: fostering participation of households, stimulating equity investment by institutional investors, reducing cross-border barriers, and achieving a higher degree of centralization and market supervision at the European level. To date, the Commission has presented a legislative proposal aimed at revitalizing the European securitization market, a recommendation on the establishment of savings and investment accounts, and plans to enhance financial literacy. Before the end of the year, it is expected to put forward additional proposals concerning the consolidation of trading and post-trading infrastructures, the transfer of certain supervisory responsibilities to ESMA, the development of supplementary pension schemes, and the promotion of long-term capital investment by institutional investors. I'm not discussing the details, but in general, these are very useful steps for which the Commission deserves due recognition. However, there is a growing awareness that overcoming market fragmentation and achieving a genuine savings and investment union requires the political will to make substantial progress on all dimensions of the strategy. And I think we, as President Letta, we welcome the Council conclusion in that regard. Looking ahead, in fact, this process needs to include at some point a willingness to tackle certain fundamental legal aspects. You can hardly have a truly integrated market without further harmonization of company law, insolvency regimes, and taxation frameworks, or without further integration of market supervision, including the convergence of supervisory practices, a single rule book, and a more unified supervisory system. The road ahead remains long. A more fluid and cohesive capital market would also facilitate the development of specialized operators focused on financing the birth and growth of innovative enterprises. European savings are strongly oriented towards low-risk, low-return assets with a high incidence of bank deposits and government securities. The segment of investment funds operating the medium term is particularly underdeveloped. The assets managed by private equity funds in Europe are about half of those in the United States, and the gap is even greater in venture capital, a form of investment used for financing innovative projects, inherently risky but potentially promising, and companies in their early stages of life. During the period 2020 to 24, average annual venture capital investment in main EU countries were, relative to GDP, slightly less than half of those in the United Kingdom and less than 1/10 of those in the United States. The causes of these gaps are manifold. They may partly reflect a different pattern of savers' preferences. It is not for the authorities to dictate preferences, but I think it's their responsibility to ensure that there are no undue obstacles to the supply of products suited to financing innovation and growth. Market integration is once again a key element. The low incidence of specialized funds reflects both the limited size of European funds and the limited presence of foreign intermediaries. Operators struggle to achieve the scale that, in theory, the overall size of the European market would allow. Investing in multiple EU countries is costly due to the fragmentation of national financial markets, which in turn stems largely from legal fragmentation. This condition limits operators' growth prospects and reduces their opportunities. Their exit opportunities are crucial for that kind of operators. The insurance field. It needs even more progress. It is important to recall that insurance plays a central role in the allocation of savings. In Italy, for example, insurance companies' total assets amount to more than 1 trillion, close to 50% of GDP. In the European Union, as President Liverani reminded us, they account for almost 60%. Despite a common European primary legislation and despite EIOPA's efforts to foster convergence, differences across member states in secondary legislation and supervisory practices remain. To create a genuinely single insurance market and ensure a level playing field, a more cohesive supervisory framework, independent and prudent, appears necessary, particularly with reference to the major European insurers. This is especially felt in consumer protection. Without a full harmonization of practices, there is some tension between the freedom to provide services across different member states and the principle of supervisory responsibility, that supervisory responsibility rests solely with the home country. In Italy, we have seen several cases over the past few years where the cross-border activity of insurers has harmed consumers without the host supervisors having adequate tools for intervention. Let me be clear. Even if it were possible, I would not advocate a renationalization of powers. That would be a step backwards. On the contrary, I would welcome progress towards more integration of the European supervisory framework. The reform of Solvency II and the Savings and Investment Union initiative share a similar goal, making Europe's financial system more resilient, efficient, and capable of channeling resources towards productive investment. The two projects are connected in many ways. Let me therefore take this opportunity to say a few words on how the process of the Solvency II reform is developing. First, one key feature of the system, the volatility adjustment, and I think President Liverani made a mention of this, had been found to work in a very unsatisfactory way and needed to be revised. We appreciate that the reformed Solvency II improves its functioning in certain respects. At the same time, we cannot but observe that this improvement comes at the price of a further increase in complexity in a mechanism that was already quite complex and opaque. The need for adjustment stems from the rule of fair value accounting, which insurance regulation applies to a far larger extent than banking regulation does. While perhaps admirable in principle, in theory, in practice this principle often gives rise to undesired or counterproductive effects, which need to be corrected in an ad hoc, non-transparent ways that may be difficult for stakeholders to understand fully. Looking ahead, some reflection on the appropriate role and the limitations as well of full fair value accounting would be warranted, bearing in mind the structure of risk in insurance companies. It is something to consider for a future Solvency III. Second, the reform is likely to allow a significant release of capital. Our analysis show that if risks and capital remain unchanged, the solvency ratio of Italian insurance companies could increase on average by 14 percentage points. The precise impact cannot, in fact, be computed until the Level 2 rules are finalized. The consultation on the delegated regulation, as the Commissioner has just reminded us, the delegated regulation that will set the Level 2 rules has just ended. I would urge the Commission to consider the implication of a massive prudential capital release carefully when fine-tuning requirements. The argument is often made that capital freed from insurance companies' requirements will be put to more productive uses in the markets, and that this is a way to foster innovative investment in the real economy. I do not know what use any released capital will be put to. I can only state, as I said many times, the opinion that the best possible contribution that financial regulation can offer to foster long-term growth is safeguarding the sound and prudent management of financial institutions through reasonable requirements, consistent with the nature, type, and degree of liquidity of their commitments, and the overall stability of the system. A final few words on insurance resolution, another area of legislation that has connection with the Savings and Investment Union project. The new Insurance Recovery and Resolution Directive introduces a minimum harmonization rules. Notably, it improves the tools available for managing cross-border cases. This is surely welcome. In a longer-term perspective, a greater level of harmonization would be needed to establish a truly barrier-free European insurance market in the spirit of what I said about the need to overcome legal fragmentation in key areas, including bankruptcy. One important element would be the definition of a common framework for insurance guarantee schemes. Reflections on the experience on the application of the Banking Recovery and Resolution Directive would also be useful. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe, we often hear, is at a crossroads. A difficult international landscape with wars and tensions is challenging many uncertainties about matters of security and peace. The acceleration of technological innovation is likely to bring with itself both opportunity and risks, as it often does. The quality of today's collective choices can make a great difference to our future security and prosperity. The broad strategic choices are in the hands of elected governments. As financial regulators, we have the responsibility to be aware of the risk for the financial system and to prepare as best we can. Accelerating innovation, while likely to be beneficial in the long run, may well cause financial turbulence along the way, the more so as its effects could be compounded by global political uncertainties. Financial instability can never be completely avoided, but we can make the system more robust and resilient through wise, adaptable regulation. It is, I think, a fact that the financial system has shown remarkable resilience through the multiple exogenous crises of the early 2020s. I surmise that regulatory reforms, especially of the banking system and in Europe of the insurance system, have contributed in no small way to this achievement. Success, however, is always temporary and should not bring complacency. Risks abound and can take new forms. As memories of the great financial crisis fade, one sees sign of a temptation to relax the rules. That would not be wise, nor would it be in the long run interest of the industry itself. Streamlining, by all means. Weakening, no. At the same time, Europe also runs a different risk, that of lagging behind in our ability to reap the benefits of new advances in human ingenuity. We cannot foretell to what extent the fourth industrial revolution that we are living through will fulfill its promise of bringing greater prosperity. But it would be ironic if the same corner of the world that started the first one more than 200 years ago were not able to enjoy in full the benefits of this most recent one. Regulation and policies need to adapt, balancing Europeans' deep-rooted desire for security with the need to allow for enough risk-taking in the economy to foster long-run economic progress. Capital markets and the financial system more generally play a key role in ensuring an economy's ability to convert savings into investment and ideas into useful innovation. Making the European financial system work as one, smoothly and efficiently, is a goal that is worth all our efforts. Thank you very much. Grazie.
Continuiamo con il prossimo panel.
So we can now continue with our next panel. Frédéric de Courtois, Virginia Borla. I will be sitting here. So, good morning, everyone. Frédéric de Courtois, President of Insurance Europe. We also have Fausto Parente, Executive Director of EIOPA. My name is Chiara Albanese. I head the Bloomberg in Italy, and I'm very, very happy to be here and to have this dialogue, to have this conversation with these guests. We shall be discussing the role of insurance companies within the Savings and Investment Union project, which is a package of wide-ranging initiatives where the insurance sector has a role to play. It is an opportunity, and it is also something necessary if we are to move in a convergent way, avoiding to miss an important opportunity. Let me start from Mr. de Courtois. How was this initiative perceived by the insurance sector? What kind of recommendations can be made so that there can be an organic development? Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Let me start by saying something which was already mentioned this morning by the various speakers. The Savings and Investment Union is not just an opportunity, it is something needed, something necessary, and as Enrico was saying, time is running out. So we from the insurance industry would like to contribute to this success, to this achievement. We want to do this, and we can do it, because today the insurance industry in Europe is one of the few economic sectors where we are still world leaders, we Europeans. This is an industry which is very strong. Let me just mention a number. We have a balance sheet of 10 trillion. So this is huge firepower, and we want to use it to contribute to this objective. So what are the key topics that are top on our mind? Well, first, the latest proposal made by the Commission concerning the savings and investment accounts. And as Giovanni was saying, we were rather disappointed by this proposal because there is no mention of the insurance sector. It is important to state, as was rightly already said by Commissioner Albuquerque, the insurance sector is important for long-term savings, but it is also important for medium-term savings. So we think we have a role to play. There is something that we can do also for these savings and investment accounts. Now, following the Commission's proposal, it's up to the various member countries to decide what to do. And we shall be discussing with the various member countries. So this is the first topic. Second topic, perhaps even more important, and I'm speaking of pensions. You know that on November the 19th, the Commission will make a proposal concerning pensions, and this is something crucial because it's a way of solving two problems, two birds with one stone. First, the sustainability of the pension system. We needed to reshape, to reform our pension system so that it can be made sustainable. And the second opportunity, the second objective that will be achieved is that we would solve one of the most serious problems that we have in Europe, that is to say, the lack of savings for long-term investments. If I compare our situation with that of the US, or if I see the situation in more successful countries such as the Netherlands, they have funds that are used. So together with the first pillar, we need to have a second and third pillar in our pension system. It is the only way in which we can have long-term investments using risky assets or equity. So not just riskless or risk-free investments. Let me touch upon a third topic, which was also discussed previously, Solvency II. Naturally, this is very important. We are very much in favor of Solvency II. There is a very strong prudential approach, high quality, thanks to Solvency II. Perhaps a bit too prudent, a bit too cautionary. We were very happy with level 1 with a text which had been voted over 1 year ago by the Parliament. And then Europe, because it is Europe, the Parliament voted something, okay, but then it takes years of discussions to get to levels 2 and 3. So it's a sort of guerrilla involving Brussels, Frankfurt, the industry, after which we can finally get to the final text. Now, the level 2 text will be with us in the next few weeks. I hope that it does not question what had already been decided at the political level, because this was, after all, the discussion in the last 18 months. We had a good text at level 1, and then our friends in Brussels and Frankfurt wanted to do something different. They want to be a bit more conservative, a bit more prudent. I am confident, but these are the 3 topics. So thank you very much for your very practical comments. Certainly there is a broader theme, the fact that the insurance sector is at a crucial intersection between citizens and European institutions. Let me ask Virginia Borla, considering the various policies that can be adopted and considering the various decisions, what are the policies or the approaches that insurance companies can use so that they can be positioned in the best possible way given the current decision-making phase? Well, good morning, everyone. Let me start from the content of the recommendation, which focuses on the world of investments. How is money to be invested? How are savings to be channeled? But let's not forget that there is another half of the equation, those who need to put up the money. We have current accounts throughout Europe with large amounts of money deposited. We did try to say that keeping money on your current account does not defend you against inflation, does not protect you against inflation. We did try to explain that investments are a value. We did say that it makes sense to rechannel this money into the production sector, into the real economy. We did try to make this point. This morning, Commissioner Albuquerque said that we must find a way to do this, to achieve this. Well, fine, but in order to achieve this objective, you need to be able to speak to the people, to the private individuals, and we insurance companies have an important role to play in this. Of course, we all need to learn how to navigate this very complex world, and we do know that there are significant amounts involved, which naturally means that we need to pay the utmost attention. However, we don't want to force people to jump right in the middle of this sea. We can help them with some support mechanisms. And yes, I know that you're referring also to the fact that sometimes private individuals feel very remote. So yes, we can act as a lifesaver. We can help out those who are not familiar with these very choppy seas. Even those who are not familiar with the world of investments can perhaps be assisted in approaching gently this new world. We can act as a bridge. This morning we had someone saying we are a bridge between entrepreneurs, business people, and savers. Well, we as a as an industry, we are a bridge between generations. We are a bridge between wealth and investments, but also we provide the support helping people to face up to risks. We act as a parachute. We can help people invest because if anything wrong happens, they don't need to disinvest. They can have investments which are guaranteed over time with no risk of fluctuations. So in my portfolio, I can include investments which may fluctuate. And by the way, this is something which people who are used to current accounts are not familiar with. But to be able to provide the savers and retail investors with these guarantees certainly helps. And I think that excluding the insurance sector from this recommendation has deprived this project from an important component. Let me remind you, the objective of this norm is not large investors. They already know how to operate. They have their consultants, they have their advisors, they know who to go to within their bank. We are here to help small investors, small savers who would be afraid to be left to operate single-handed and need instead to be assisted. Let me just have a quick follow-up on this. So this is when the time has come to further enhance your role, or how else do you see your part? How can you best contribute to the success of this European initiative? And when do we need to have your role enhanced? Yesterday, I should say? Well, as quickly as possible, today. It's a recommendation. It's not a regulation. There is time for reflection, for negotiation, for discussion. So the time is right for us to be included in this consulting process, in this reflection. So can we ask Mr. Parente to give us some additional details as to the contribution that the insurance sector can give to contribute to the success of this initiative? Well, EIOPA is trying to suggest something concrete to the Commission. This has not been made public as yet because the recommendation mentioned by the Commissioner this morning really concerns something else. By the way, I would not have been surprised had she mentioned insurance products, but we are working on something different here. And here again, let me say that I share the urgency which was mentioned by Enrico Letta. We have worked to try and do things differently from the past, when things were done more slowly with the participation of all domestic experts to try and find a convergent view, suggesting the Commission how to proceed. But this time things have been done in a completely different way. We worked in summer with the EIOPA staff. We did hear from the national authorities, and then in just 3-4 months we responded to the Commission's requests. We felt this sense of urgency. We realized that we needed to operate quickly. We tried to come up with the concrete proposals on how to revitalize this sector. Two birds with a stone, as you were saying, Frederick. Both revitalizing, rechanneling these huge amounts of savings that Europeans have. Europeans save 3 times as much as Americans, not to mention Italians. I'm a European. I'm speaking Italian, but I think as a European. Anyway, we have these huge assets, these huge amounts of savings that need to be better channeled. And then we have the problem of the pension system, which needs to be put right. Things are somewhat different according to the various member countries, but we know that there is going to be pension deterioration from 36 to 51%, and the first pillar alone cannot respond to this requirement. We need pillars 2 and 3. And we have provided some specific proposals, as Commissioner Albuquerque said. IORP 2 needs to be improved. We want to have these voluntary schemes. So anyone wishing to scale up the managed assets could do so with this 28th regime. Let's see if it is approved. I am confident that in the November communication we shall see something. And then, as President Liverani was saying, there's been a sort of failure for Europe because we have worked on this regulation on a pan-European personal pension products, and now we have just 2 products in the market, one from Cyprus and one from Slovakia. And this is not what we expected. It's not the success that we anticipated. We know why we failed. Partly the cap which was introduced on costs by Parliament, partly the treatment the tax treatment introduced by countries which was not always in line with recommendations. We did make a proposal on how to revitalize this pan-European personal pension product initiative. We need also to engage in rebranding. So Europension, a simple product. Fundamentals are no different from what we had before. We just need to do away with obstacles which are derived from the complexity and from the cross-border dimension of this initiative. So we may have products which are which are truly supranational, can benefit from this label if the Commission accepts our proposal. And this means that we can revitalize a product that can be used for pensions. So we do have an emergency in our pension systems to a different degree according to the different country where you may be located, but it is there. Frédéric de Courtois, back to you. The insurance sector, together with the pension system, is one of the sectors where individuals and savers need to be educated more and better informed of the various initiatives underway. So we do have this initiative which is merely targeted at the small retail investors. So without initiatives that you're adopting in order to boost the participation by a wider public, how can you boost and facilitate better participation? Well, let me say that we need a strong financial sector, a transparent and affordable financial sector. And if I look at Europe, I'm being provocative here, but in Europe we no longer have world-class banks. We no longer have asset management companies which are world-class. We have world-class insurance companies still, but let me say something more. There's insurance companies in Europe today have 2/3 of medium and long-term investments by European nationals. So we don't want to weaken, but we do want to simplify. And let me give you a couple of examples. We have this famous FIDA regulation, which Commissioner Albuquerque is very fond of, but we don't like it at all. And why is this? Well, we are not at all favorable because typically this is a regulation where there is no business case. You have very high costs. And it forces us, European companies, to share our data with major American players. Come on. We don't want to inflict self-harm. As you would say in English, why? So for us, it's an all-go. AI Act, the AI Act. This is another example. Of course, we want to regulate artificial intelligence. We know that. This is quite clear, but the AI Act regulated everything without even knowing what artificial intelligence is going to be like in 2 years' time. So we have all sorts of norms, all sorts of rules, high risk. The insurance company, is considered to be high risk, lots of constraints and limits. But when it was enacted, there was no knowledge as to what AI agents could do. And then we also need to have a real single market. We need to have platforms and exchanges which need to be of a very high quality indeed, so that costs are lower. We want to have solvency rules which are totally harmonized. I know it's not easy, but this is what having a single market means, and this is something that we have been lacking for the past 25 years. And then one final point. I know that EIOPA is working on this. We want to favor and promote investments by insurance companies into infrastructure or into small and medium enterprises or into venture capital. And we can achieve this with private-public partnerships. We can achieve this with a good and right solvency levels for these sectors. So we know exactly what needs to be done. We are only too aware of what needs to be done, but it must be done.
If I may, I would like to make reference to this final remark with Virginia Borra. We've talked about how to involve citizens and how to protect them, given the significant changes at a global level. There is political tension between the United States and Europe. How can the insurance sector, how can the venture capital sector, and how can businesses be involved? Italian businesses, as we know, need some form of support. And how can we focus this, bearing in mind the need to develop infrastructure as well? A lot has already been said. I'm going to try and say something new. Well, I think that there are some very fascinating conversations on this same topic at the moment. But this panel, you see, is great because you all have a different background. So perhaps you could talk about your view representing a bank such as Intesa San Paolo with instruments that are very different with respect to the other organizations and businesses represented here. Well, certainly, as a bank, insurance bank, we can have significant advantages. We know our clients. We can provide, as a dual form of support. So we have a range of options available to support businesses with a very, let's say, varied offering. Going back to insurance, which is today's focus, certainly there are a number of things that have to be said with respect to the new solvency. We need to understand the constraints. We will need to see how to manage, let's say, capital constraints differently if needed. Secondly, we need to inform businesses that there are other options available in our country, in particular for small and medium-sized enterprises, mostly people. The source of funding is through a bank or households. The idea that there is such a thing as venture capital, that there are funds that access through that route, we engage in medium to long-term investment, and we can invest in these sectors, and so knowledge is fundamental. I'd like to also add another point tying up with what we were saying earlier with respect to pension funds. We talked about pension funds, and by definition these are very long-term investors, and they don't just require a better coverage, but we know that those who already have some form of coverage tend to show low risk, to select low risk 20, 30-year solutions, which means limiting the end result. So on the one hand, we have culture, knowledge of what is available, and then we have the contribution of those who invest through pension funds, amongst other solutions. And we mentioned Germany this morning. Well, one shouldn't start at the age of 18. We should start from birth. And therefore, when we need to consider a significant reform of the pension system, we have to look at sociology and not just demographics. Often we know it's the grandparents who have the household wealth, and sometimes we know that families have changed. We're not just talking about relatives here, but we've not evolved in the same way. We've just stuck with the standard approach. This is an important process. And then finally, some European countries are reaping the benefits of tax mechanisms that reward consumers who keep investment for a period of 8 years or more, depending on the country. And this is something we should consider because it gives us the possibility of increasing duration and not just being a bridge between, let's say, old and new clients, but we can also guarantee investment as a bridge, increasing the total mass and offering new solutions. There's so much that one could do. There are various factors involved. We have to try and take a comprehensive approach, and as we were saying this morning, talking about the report, the aim is to ensure that investment stays in Europe, because if we don't do anything and others were to make significant choices before us, then of course the risk is that culture and development opportunities are not going to concern Europe, but other regions of the world. And now we have with us Riccardo Barbieri, who is Director Barbieri Limited, Director General of the Treasury, Ministry of the Economy and Finance. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Now, of course, it's very important to shift the focus somewhat. So far, we've talked about what the insurance sector can achieve within the framework of the Savings Investment Union. And of course, it is very interesting to hear from a more institutional perspective, from a political perspective, because certainly the insurance sector must work hand in hand with institutions. So the question for Mr. Hermite is, could you kindly give us a brief overview of what Europe is doing with respect to the SIU, and could you also tell us how we can, let's say, see the opportunities for the insurance sector? Good morning. As you probably know, this new stage in an effort to complete the European capitals market started last year with a Eurogroup statement that was broadened to include, let's say, a European Union initiative. The Commission in spring launched an initial communication. There is an important block, that of securitization. More recently, we have seen the effects on the investment product for savers, for customers, and we're now awaiting other aspects such as integration and, in the long term, unification of banking supervision, both in the capital markets and in the pension fund sector as well. Obviously, we need to support this effort, bearing in mind that the Capital Markets Union can be successful. The interpreter apologizes, but unfortunately the speaker's image has just frozen. We have to achieve an efficient integration of the European capitals markets, and we have to ensure adequate fragmentation.
Quali sono le aspettative, quali sono gli obiettivi per quanto riguarda l'Unione del mercato dei capitali?
We have to consider that these measures that we're discussing have in many instances been considered as a sort of cure-all for problems such as a low level of productivity growth in Europe compared to the US. Of course, there are many other problems that explain this underperformance, and yet we share the idea that an integrated capitals market is key for our strategy, and therefore when it comes to the insurance sector as well, the aim should be that of ensuring harmonization in the medium to long-term integration with respect to the supervisory system. This is key not just for the operational success of the system, but also to guarantee the availability of safe solutions. We know that there are products that have been vetted, say, but obviously we need to make sure that if they're sold in other countries, they should not generate problems. So we have to focus on the efficiency of the sector, the growth of the sector, and last but not least, interpreter apologizes. Unfortunately, again, the sound and the video is just frozen. We have to, in Italy, consider that the focus should be on the most important topics, so namely pension funds. I don't know if this is something that could be discussed at a later stage. Thank you. I'd like to go back to Fausto Parente briefly to ask for an additional comment on a topic that we touched upon briefly, i.e. how to ensure that funds and the European market can, let's say, develop and expand more than we're seeing at the moment compared to the US. What are your recommendations, and how can we guarantee a sort of harmonization of the European market liable to make Europe more competitive with respect to other giants? And I'd also like to ask you to comment briefly on what Riccardo Barbieri Hermita said, representing the institutions, if you will. Well, I must say, as Mr. Letta said, in November we're going to see a recommendation only, and it's a shame, but at least we have something on the pension dashboard, pension tracking system, and these are tools that almost compel workers to save with this self-enrollment process. This is the second pillar, because there is significant trust in the way in which employers manage funds. But in a way, this has to be almost compulsory, with opting out mechanisms if needed, if a worker would like to exit this. But there have to be a set of incentives to ensure that people save more. Tracking instruments are available in some countries, not in others. It's quite easy. Every citizen via an app can check the projection to see when the first, let's say, pension will be paid in and how much it will amount to, the replacement rate. And very few European citizens have this type of information. So this is important to incentivize savings in the long term. However, let me add that the sector can also improve somewhat, not just from an institutional point of view with tax incentives, which of course are always important, but let's not forget that the products available must be in line with the different needs. We've seen the initiatives of the group of countries, part of the countries of the willing, Invest Europe, a 5-year time horizon, if I'm not mistaken, but to catch two birds with a stone, address the pension gap and better channel private investment in the economy, it takes more. It takes products that are both long-term and also specifically designed for capital accumulation and deaccumulation, because we know that when people retire, they need to be able to save in the long term, because luckily life expectancy has increased and will continue to increase. So the products have to be more, say, far-sighted, more long-term. And how can we involve citizens more? A question from Mr. Barbieri. Given this constant demographic change, which is also to change our approach to investment and saving. We can't hear you, says the moderator.
Scusate, l'ho disattivato.
My fault. I'd forgotten to switch my microphone on again. And we have to consider the different dimensions. Of course, the sooner we start, the better. The sooner we start accumulating in pension funds, the more likely it is that over time there will be the possibility of accumulating capital with an important benefit. So this is a culture that needs to be introduced in a country that traditionally has quite a high savings rate, and with simple instruments capable of being efficient from an IT point of view, then users could identify possible scenarios, possible benefits, depending on age, depending on say their selection, their choice with respect to savings propensity. We're also to consider other forms. Europe is characterized by banking deposits that are the preferred, let's say, savings solution. That being the case, however, financial education can also be used for people to have a rather more advanced vision, and therefore it'll be possible for capital to flow into the system. We know that banks, by definition, are lenders, and we're not suggesting that we should eliminate banking loans as a way of supporting businesses or households when they decide to buy a new home. But certainly this is something that can be developed further. Thank you very much. Today we've had a long morning, which has been very intense. I have one final question, a short question for each of the panelists. What would you like to see in Europe in a few years' time? What is your, let's say, wish? What's at the top of your wish list? I think we know what needs to be done, thanks to the two excellent excellent reports by Enrico Letta and Mario Draghi. We have no doubt as to where we should be heading. It's all about implementation, and that's not easy because the European Commission has always regulated. That's what we've always asked. Now we're saying, oh, sorry, you should make Europe competitive. Well, that's a different matter altogether. So my hope is that the Commission and all key players at a European and national level may have the courage it takes to change things properly so that Europe can become more competitive. One final closing remark. Europe is characterized by a very high level of savings. I'm sorry if I stumbled on this Italian word. It's also a very competitive context. There's going to be a clash between insurance companies and asset management companies. There's a difference. Big insurance companies are almost all European. Asset managers are almost all American. I would like to have a level playing field. I would like everyone to be aware of what value can be brought by and is brought by insurance companies. Two things, namely retail distribution networks, agents, intermediaries, banks. They can provide the right type of advice, and insurance companies bring something very important that's very important compared to asset managers. We can provide capital guarantees. We can provide annuities. I'm sorry, again, I'm stumbling on this word. It's very hard to speak in Italian throughout the panel. I was not given the choice. I haven't been speaking Italian in 5 years. Well, no, you're doing great. So, annuities. We also bring in guarantees in case of death, disability, and this is very useful. We have to be brave, we have to be bold, and recognize the value of big and small insurance companies in Europe. I'd like to add the following. I want to say something different compared to the other panelists. Of course, we have to remember that this sector has a lot to give, and shouldn't just be considered as a source of funding when the budget discussion is taking place. I have a background in banking and insurance. These two worlds are based on a different set of rules, and it's important to continue reminding people that this world is somewhat unique and has its own set of features, and we have to be forward-looking and not backward-looking. Take the case of pensions. Well, at some point in time, in terms of communication, we were inviting people to, carry out verifications and so on, and checks. People don't. They think that's something that's way into the future. We should stop thinking about young people as our future, but as our present. And that can enable us to start acting now for the current benefits, and not wait 20 years, because in 20 years' time we will have a future only if we start working on that future today, in the present or in the past. Well, after having spent almost 10 years in Frankfurt to try and reach some form of convergence on national supervisory practices, in the next 5 years, I won't be around probably, but hopefully this is going to be the case. My hope for the next 5 years is to ensure that the single market be the single market of citizens, because now it's only the single market of businesses. Businesses decide to settle in a country and can sell everywhere in Europe. And it's becoming easier thanks to digital channels. A citizen who chooses to purchase or invest in a cross-border product doesn't know what supervisory regime will be applied. So treatment is different depending on place of birth, residence, and say place of establishment of the insurance company. And as Mr. Signorini said, we are not looking to go back to attributing powers to national authorities, but we really do need to make sure that we can solve these possible crises. I fully agree with what Frédéric said. We have to safeguard our insurance champions with a single supervisory system involving big groups. I know you're going to disagree with me, but why can't AXA use its internal model in certain European countries? Why? Because local authorities have some doubts. These differences must be overcome. It's not something that's going to happen in the next 5 years or so, but this is my wish. As we've seen in the banking sector, we have to promote competitiveness, ensure that there is a level playing field, and that can only be delivered if we have a more integrated single supervisory mechanism. The last to speak is going to be Mr. Barbieri. Well, as a general rule, we are committed to promoting the SIU, the Savings Investment Union, looking at the benefits for all and our country in particular. There's one important point to be made. The insurance sector obviously must be able to offer the right types of assets, considering the type of investment involved. For instance, securitization is potentially an important aspect. We have to make sure that insurance companies can invest in this type of asset, and for this there have to be adequate regulations in place, regular set of rules. And then we have to also look to those sectors where the public investment element is the strongest. Private investors, on the other hand, could have an important role to play. Investment in infrastructure can develop assets that could be very suitable given the type of investment that insurance companies are more likely to be interested in. So we mustn't just focus on what we were saying earlier, i.e. integration or unification of supervision, but we need to seek to harmonize it at the very least. Furthermore, we also need to have assets which could bring improvements benefiting our economy, our growth, and our public finances. And this is a topic of huge relevance in the next few years for countries such as us and Germany. Germany has announced significant public investment projects, but in all likelihood there's going to have to be a mixed system, to say the very least, combining both public and private sectors. And I think that once again there will be the opportunity to develop, let's say, the real economy and the insurance sector at the same time. I'd also like to mention initiatives to mitigate climate and environmental risk. We've introduced an innovative legislative approach in our country. There's still room for improvement. We can broaden this approach to promote insurance against catastrophes and natural disasters. Thank you. I really wish to thank our panelists today. This was a fascinating round table discussion, and I hope your wishes may all come true. Thank you.
Federico Freni,
Federico Freni, Undersecretary, Ministry of Finance.
Buongiorno, facciamo finire il jingle. Buongiorno.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Liverani. Thank you very much, ANIA. Where's Chiara? Well, let me start from the last question that Chiara had asked, addressing the previous speakers. What do we need to do for the future? So I'd like to start from there. Chiara, I'm sorry, I borrowed one of your questions. Look, I will try to be honest. Perhaps we need to wake up. We need a wake-up call for the future. Perhaps we need to be a bit less of a dreamer, a bit more of a practitioner. By the way, I was a dreamer in the past, and I dreamt of the Capital Markets Union. I still remember that. I am a dreamer of the CMU. I'm very happy. However, there is something that Commissioner Albuquerque said. We are watching you, she said. Is that a promise or a threat? By the way, I'm delighted. I'm only too happy if someone is watching over us, if someone helps us to make progress. However, the experience of the last few years teaches me that yes, we have been often watched, but very rarely did we manage to achieve actual results. And Enrico's quite right when he said that every year that goes by, well, I would say every day that goes by, we become less resilient and financially weaker, more fragile. So, however, I don't want to disappoint you, but we cannot imagine that this can be done for small savers and not for large savers. Anyone who's operated in the market, even once, is perfectly aware of the fact that this project cannot only be addressed to small savers, otherwise it will fail. Small savers do not make up the market. The market is something else altogether. But what do we mean exactly by small savers, by the way? These savings that we have on current accounts, yes. But an everyday woman called Maria, the epitome of a small saver, she's fed up with just keeping 10,000 euros in a bank account. She wants to mobilize it. She wants to use it so that she can contribute to the economy of the country. She's not going to buy securities herself. She's going to ask a financial consultant, and hopefully she's going to invest in a balanced package which may or may not include some securities, or perhaps she's going to go straight into funds. But whatever, certainly this lady is not going to invest herself. There is only a very tiny percentage of savers who make direct investments at their own risk and peril, by the way, sometimes with disastrous results. So this mythical figure, the small saver that needs to be protected, I'm all in for protection, of course, but they're not going to be protected by devising a specific ad hoc legislation. They will never go straight to the market. They will always have a mediated approach. They will always go through an intermediary. And this is going to be the case increasingly. If you look at the role of financial consultants, they are rising, while instead direct investments are declining. So small savers, if they are to be helped, require the presence of an ecosystem which makes it possible for large investors to create products which are geared to the needs of small investors. So we all want to have harmonization of the market, but this does not mean harmonization or homogenization of products, because products which are all alike are not resilient to shocks. If we have identical products, if we have products which are all alike, which are not differentiated, the system is going to be a lot more fragile than it already is. By the way, I'm not a fan of financial markets. I would like to have a single capitals market. That is something I've wanted for years, but we also must face up to reality. We can all dream, but at night, at day, you need to get down to work. And by the way, you can fall asleep at your desk and dream again, but theoretically, when you work, you should really try to translate your dreams into practice. And translating these dreams into practice means starting from the early point that is really necessary to invest small savers to rechannel their funds, explaining that it is necessary for the country and useful for them not to keep the 10,000 euros on a current account, but rather to use it for alternative investments. And perhaps this lady, when she becomes a mother, can open up a supplementary or complementary pension fund in a child's name, and they can start paying 50 euros a month into this account. And she can also underwrite an LTC, which means that she's going to be reassured and guaranteed. And we also know that we can expect healthcare costs in Italy to be lower and not higher. And then, if she so wishes, she can also start a health policy, a health insurance policy. So I am trying to include insurance-based products into my points. We are not speaking of dreams here. We are speaking of financial education, financial literacy, failing which we shall not go anywhere. We can continue dreaming of having single markets, but unless we educate our citizens, our savers, we will never be able to have a true union. Otherwise, people will continue being afraid of a single market, of having a real union. And by the way, this financial education is something which is sorely lacking. If you visit any school in Italy, I'm not saying a primary school, but a secondary school, the best secondary school in the best, most sophisticated city in Italy, where you have an elite, take your pick, it doesn't matter which, and ask 3 very simple financial literacy questions. You will be psychologically destroyed by this experience because you will realize that these teenagers, these young adults, and don't know the first thing about anything. I'm not speaking of primary school children. I'm speaking of teenagers. We have a total lack of financial education. So this is where we need to start from, because if we don't start, we shall never have the final result. So it isn't just a question of imagining wonderful future achievements. We just need to look at reality how it is, not how we would like it to be or how it could be. Actually, it would be a wonderful world if tomorrow morning, instead of having 10 different exchanges, we had only one. Or if instead of having N markets, we only had one. Okay, Deutsche Börse and Euronext will then need to settle and be reconciled because the markets union is not being achieved because there are some economic interests which prevent an agreement from being reached. But this is a different matter. Perhaps we can get to this unity, to the union, when we understand that the market is not just an ice cream shop where you choose the flavors that you prefer. A market is a place where you can lose and win, where there are fluctuations. That's the way the market operates. It isn't a safe haven. Otherwise, you may think that it is a right to have zero interest rates and a mortgage with a zero interest rate. While he said it is just a twist of fate. And then people are just very surprised because interest rates are rising. Why are you surprised? They were at zero. This is not the norm. It was expected interest rates would rise. So if we think that the market is like an ice cream parlor where you just come in and choose the flavor that you prefer, then you might expect that everything is always bright and wonderful, which is not the case with markets, not at all. So if we are able to educate our children, if we can teach our our children, if we help them think that everything is going to be wonderful with the market, our future generation, our children, will not blame us when things go wrong. They will blame the market. And this is all wrong. We must certainly teach that markets are a wonderful thing. They are necessary, but they can also give you some unwelcome surprises, because this is what markets are. Then we can certainly discuss whether or not markets are the best possible solution. There was a wonderful legal discussion on this in the 1990s, and it is, I think, a fruitful discussion. Perhaps markets are no longer the entities which impose the law today, so perhaps a government should consider markets entering into dialogue with the market without having the market impose its own laws on them. But anyway, if we re-educate, we can truly achieve what we wanted to obtain. However, if we don't re-educate, we can be in a very dire situation indeed. There was this major disenchantment with interest rates. People were heavily disappointed, but it was a lack of information, lack of education. Small savers, who, after all, are those who elect the members of the European Council, may be unhappy with the current situation of interest rates, but they are not put right. These small savers are not being educated, are not being corrected. We are not setting the record straight. So the role of insurance companies today, well, we know that insurance companies play an extraordinary role in our everyday life, but one of their specific roles is also to educate savers that markets can do well or do badly. That you may be fine, in good health today, but you may not be in good health tomorrow, which means that you need health protection. We have spoken of NatCat policies, NatCat, natural catastrophe insurance. We often say that these policies are for the rich, even health care or health policies are for the rich, but this is the situation in the whole of Europe. These policies exist in all European countries. I know we are close to our lunch break, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but we can certainly continue dreaming of a hypothetical market, or we can instead work on the market we would like to have in a practical way. But this market cannot be built if we think everything is easy and positive. And what we therefore need is financial education, which takes into account the political impact which follows financial education. So if we keep this in mind, probably our children can look forward to a real single market, which is what we want today. And if we don't have it, we are to blame. So if we want to build it for our children, we can start educating them and educating ourselves so that we are ready for this new single market.
Giovanni Liverani, Presidente ANIA.
Giovanni Liverani, President of ANIA. So, ladies and gentlemen, we come to our lunch break, so I will not be too long. Certainly, I wanted to thank all of our rapporteurs for their interesting contributions. We heard from various speakers with different positions, different perspectives and viewpoints. We heard from the European Commissioner, we heard from the Italian government, we had the two representatives of our regulator, we had companies representatives represented, the business sector represented. But in actual fact, there was a great convergence. It was almost tedious, but this is excellent news because we have this very important topic, the Savings and Investment Union, which can help Europe strengthen its position against a very complex geopolitical backdrop where Europe has been weakened. So if we all converge, if we all agree, this means that we are all aware of the fact that we need to get things done quickly, as Mr. Letta was saying, and as Mr. Freni said right now, we cannot just dream. We also need to translate these dreams into practice. So my hope is that also thanks to this conference, we can set the stage for this project to be implemented as quickly as possible. Let me close by mentioning the need to have a more widespread insurance awareness and culture. This is one of the reasons why we decided to organize this conference today. It is important for people to understand the role of insurance companies for the single capitals, the single capital market, for the Savings and Investment Union. We can organize additional events to address other points, other aspects, the second and third pillars, the problem with NatCat policies, the silent killer I mentioned in my initial presentation, the demographic risk, hence the need to protect citizens against economic fragility and physical fragility in their third and fourth age. Long-term care initiatives are a case in point. It is something that we need to consider very carefully, and also the need to produce financial education for Signora Maria, for this hypothetical investor, and for her children. And in November and December, we shall address this problem by introducing initiatives in secondary schools in a number of large Italian cities, so that these students can be informed of what insurance companies do and what the insurance sector is all about. The insurance industry can certainly help our country to grow, but it is also a very valuable instrument to solve some very relevant social and economic problems. I would like to thank all those who have contributed to the excellent organization of this event, and I wish you a fruitful day. Thank you.